All right, let's gently get this show on the road. Thank you, everybody. This is a session oriented towards users of the Science platform. The intent is to actually give the users a bunch of space to talk in. If you do not have any questions, it means I will have to talk more at you, and you presumably do not want that. So start thinking about your questions now. And okay, so this is the standard reminders to not be a bad person. I will say that we're a bunch of a lot of technical people here. We occasionally start talking over each other. That's fine, but Zoom hands get priority. So please do use your Zoom hand if you can. And do please, if you have signed up to the Slack channel, please use the Slack channel in preference to the Zoom chat for additional questions and commentary, because it's easier for us to go back and reply to questions we didn't catch or we want to give a longer answer to after the session has actually finished. Christine is hopefully online. Christine, can we hear you?
Yeah, I'm here. How are you guys doing?
Excellent. All right. So Christine is going to be moderating the Slack and bringing up questions for live discussions, since I unfortunately can't read Slack and do anything else at the same time, apparently. And again, apologies, you had to bring your own coffee. This is very poor hospitality, and when we're back in person, we'll at least provide you with coffee. All right. So let me start off with a couple of kind of general comments. So the Ruby Science Platform is a term that's now starting to be used to mean more than it used to. So we're going to clarify a little bit, which is, technically and by definition and by requirements, the vision document, the Science Platform is 3 aspects: portal, web portal, a notebook service, and a set of APIs that allow equivalent access to the eventual LSST data products. That is what that is. It's a programmatic term. We have to deliver it. We have to pass requirements and verification and so on. But as time has gone back on, it has drifted to kind of people use it to mean other things, including aspects of the code base. The actual deployment, people will say the RSP is down when just one thing is down, which is all understandable and very but kind of get occasionally confusing. There are also services that are very critical to the RSP, for example, QServe, that we don't expect users to be able to make the differentiation that one was delivered by one team and the other was delivered by another team. So don't worry if you get that wrong, but occasionally we will ask you follow-up questions if we are confused as to what you mean. So of the core products, the 3 aspects, there are 2 teams that have provided them. One of them is the Firefly team based at IPAC, and I'm not sure whether we have anybody from that team here. If they are, please say something so you can pop at the top of the Zoom list. The Firefly team, of course, at IPAC is supporting Firefly in many other contexts, particularly the RSA archive. So this is great software we use. And there's my own team, Square, which pretty much provides the kind of the notebook, now the APIs and the rest of the infrastructure, now also the authentication authorization. We also do other things with the observatory, like run the telemetry database, which we developed, and work on the documentation system that you've been using if you've gone to lsst.io and so on. And of course, I've been very lucky to have 3 great product owners, which are Gregory, who's the overall Science Platform product owner, and Simon, who's the notebook product owner, and Colin, who is the data access product owner, and they've been terrific joy to work with. And their job in the team is to essentially represent the viewpoint of the science users to the team and the viewpoint of the team to the science users. So they've been doing a really good job with that. And of course, we're just the very last layer of the cake with a little happy couple at the top of the wedding cake. There are many, many other teams around us and before us and ahead of us in the data processing, such as the pipelines teams, QServe, the middleware team is providing Butler and the data services, community engagement team, which a lot of you will have interacted with, especially this week, and our various infrastructure teams, including our Chilean IT team, the team at NCSA, the team at Slack, and the team at Google. So lots of shoulders of giant stuff here. All right, so something that might surprise some of you, if you're not in project, is that we actually have many, many deployments of the science platform already. We tend to, as an internal shorthand, we call those the telescope deployments and the science deployments. The telescope deployments are actually running within the control network of the summit because commissioning staff are using the notebook service to actually command devices and analyze the results in the notebook and then recommand the devices. They're also using the Firefly viewer to preview images. So these are very special deployments, very locked down. If you're not commissioning staff or summit night staff, you don't have access to those. But nevertheless, we support 4 of these. We support the summit. There's one at the base facility in La Serena. Theoretically, I think it might be offline right now. There's the one attached to the NCSA test stand, which is a hardware test stand that engineers use, and there's one coming up right now with the Tucson test stand. And then we have our science, and these are, by the way, the color coding is like who provides the infrastructure. So the purple infrastructure is provided by Christian Silva, as IT group in Chile, who's kind of our IT DevOps group of data management. You saw Christian because he ran that quite fun cyber infrastructure quiz the other day. The orange are deployments that are run at NCSA at the construction data facility. And the green ones are ones that are being run on behalf of operations on the interim data facility at Google. So they're entirely cloud-based. And there are essentially, let me get those people the way. There are three kind of, we consider production deployments very high priority if something's wrong with them. And just so nobody's offended, the summit comes first. And we have recently bumped up the Google deployment for our delegates as second because there's a lot of more users on it. And then we have the internal project deployment at NCSA, which we kind of put third, not that because we don't love you guys, but because usually folks have more workarounds available to them if something is not quite right. And of course, coming soon, there's more. The USDF is ramping up. It will have its own deployment, possibly 2. The UK data facility, and we'll be hearing from those folks later on today. The UK data facility is also has adopted the science platform and has a deployment up already. And France actually, I believe, has 2 deployments in preparation. I think one at Annecy and one in Lyon, and somebody should absolutely correct me if I didn't get that right. All right, so let's see. Let me tell you a couple more things, and then I'm really going to open the floor. Things that are going on right now that as an RSP user, whether internal or external, you might want to care about. We have new notification banners, and as of yesterday, even newer notification banners that allows us to be able to notify users of upcoming maintenance and that kind of thing without resorting to other broadcast mechanisms. This is kind of very new work and will eventually be extended to have user-specific notifications like, hey, you have exceeded your quota or something like that down the road. So that's infrastructure we intend to build on. We've done a whole amount of work on how we handle the kind of schema delivery from the data pipelines team through the QServe team and to us to really speed that process up and automate it and make sure that we're not wasting people's time making small schema changes. So that's all now automated and builds out. You don't see that directly, but it makes a huge difference to us in our ability to get changes out to you. From the notebook aspect, there is I do want to highlight to the internal users in particular that we're changing how we're handling what we designated as the recommended. That's the default image at the top of your list when you spin up Tablado. For the data preview users, the request was that we have a more slow-moving release than weekly for the recommended, so that the community engagement team has time to prep for it and verify that things are okay. But we also don't want to leave it too long, because this code base is under very active development, and every release you get better service. So we are going to move to using a more slow recommended even at NCSA, but the latest weekly will always be available through the drop down, or we can even we can do that. And so we are in preparation now of our first weekly update since data preview 0, which is to go from weekly 25 to weekly 33. And if anybody has any questions what that process looks like, and I doubt it, but I will be able to answer them for you. I think the big user facing thing here is we really been trying to get to Jupyter Lab 3.0 for a while. Other things have always gotten ahead of it, but we're getting, I think, very close to actually embarking on this work. So we should be able to get that this year. Jupyter Lab 3.0 has a lot of really nice features, including debugger, notebook debugger built in, which I'm sure will be great. And also table of contents, which will also be great because, man, those notebooks are getting long. And see, the Firefly latest client is in preparation and will be rolling out with the 33 weekly, I believe. For those of you who know that the portal development was actually frozen for a while, victim of the stretching timeline of the project, and we're hoping to resume that soon because very popular with the users. Then authentication authorization. There's been lots of work underneath the hood, and I know for a general user group, you probably don't want to know much about it, but we did notice a whole bunch of user confusion and issues when we opened to the data preview delegates, and we've done a whole bunch of fixes to make sure that things are less confusing and the system behaves more than what a user might expect. And we have been doing lots of scale testing that has uncovered fairly rare bugs that we have fixed. So internal users in particular, who historically have been known to go, oh, my lab didn't spawn, I'll have to do it again, or it timed out, I'm going to try again. You should get way fewer of these. All right. This is a reminder. I'm not going to dwell on this, but I will come back if you don't have questions, so be aware. But of course, the science platform is nowhere near finished. This is a service that we've pushed out early to help the community prepare and to help us build a better platform. But we've put out a science platform before we've actually received a single frame of data from our main telescope. So there is yet a lot of work to be done. And we are absolutely looking at the user experience and changing the priority of the remaining work on the basis of what we see. But everything has to be done before construction ends. All right, so you are the content of this session. Here are some prompts on things that you might bring up. This is a safe space. You can do all this. I've given you a list of a whole bunch of things you might want to think to mention that you're not happy about. You can also mention if you're happy. But just before we finally open the floor, let me actually do the promised event and actually introduce you to some of the developers. So I am going to scan down this list and kind of try to bring everything up. And if you guys want to say hi, that will pop to the top of the screen and people can see your face, so you're not just a username that tells them that we are working on your problem when a bug is filed. So we have Adam from Square. Hello, Adam. Adam is looking for the mute button. We have.
There we go. Hi.
There we go. Hello, Adam. We have Christine, also Square engineer, who is moderating. We have Jonathan from Square. We have, let's see, Russ. Russ is here.
Hello.
and Simon and Angelo surely is here, and Angelo. So that is the Square team. We're a small team. We do a lot, and I don't think the Firefly folks are here. Is Trey or Loy here?
No, they didn't. They didn't make it. There was
but Gregory is here. So hello, Gregory, and
Hi.
Gregory is also based at IPAC and has very close links with the Firefly team. So, all right, Christine, do we have any questions lined up already? No. All right, I am going to pick somebody from the list that I know has something to complain about if nobody comes forward.
You could ask the users to introduce themselves. We don't know them.
Well, there's a lot of people on this call. It would be nice if
Alex has a hand. Alex has a hand.
Alex has a hand. Okay.
I just wanted to say before we start complaining that like the RSP is awesome, and like I just want to say like the support for it has been really, really great, and I'm definitely one of the people who like doesn't stay quiet when when things are not working the way that I would expect them to, and the support has always been like really incredible. So I just want to like recognize that before we get into complaint session.
Thank you, Alex. And I will actually introduce Alex since she has spoken. Alex has a number of hats in this project, but he is also a member of the community engagement team. So he has worked on the wonderful tutorial notebooks that we've made available to data preview users. I would like to hear, if there's no hands, I would like to hear from, do we have any users here that do not particularly feel comfortable in Python? Like, people who would rate themselves as kind of, on the newbie side of Python. Do we have it? I keep wanting to meet one of those users because the project is very Pythonista, and so I would actually like to have some questions from those folks.
Mario has also got a question in the Slack about the notification panel, and if we're going to push that upstream. I'm not sure exactly which notification panel it is, but maybe on the call we can talk about it. But we try to push everything upstream that they're going to take.
Yeah.
Is that the Square One notification panel that
That might be the Square One. Yeah,
okay,
the user notification process.
Right. So okay. All right. So when you go to the top page, right? So if you're a data preview user, the data.list is data cloud. If you're an internal user to your to LSP stable or whatever, there is an application called Square One, which we have developed that actually is essentially the umbrella application. It has the front landing page, of course, but it also has and will have increasing other number of screens like manage your account, for example, and gateway to the UIs for authentication and account management pages and so on. So Semaphore is the package that handles now the banners, which is also a standalone package that is being used by Square One. So it's not part of JupyterLab or anything. It's something that we wrote. And it is available with the Science Platform deployment, and it can be deployed. That's kind of at an alpha stage right now, but everything we do, of course, is open source and is reusable to folks that are working within our framework. Let's see. I have Gregory and Jonathan. I'm going to give Jonathan first since he actually wrote Semaphore. So I assume that's what is being asked about.
Yeah, I can just comment on the more Jupyter integration of this notification. So yeah, because Semaphore is a web API service, it means that all of the aspects can actually interact with this notification. So they can add notifications, and they can also draw notifications. So one of the ideas we do have is to have a widget in the JupyterLab UI to show these messages. And we haven't started that yet, but that's one idea. And it's either a native JupyterLab component that already exists we'll integrate into, or we'll build something and of course contribute that upstream as open source if we make it. And then we're also looking at browser notifications as a progressive web app, so that you can get like native device notifications that way as well.
To answer Brown's question, I'm sorry, Gregory, I know you're waiting. To answer Brown's questions on the Slack, the slides were still being written 2 minutes before the session started, so they will absolutely be made available as soon as I get off this call and upload them. Apologies, we're kind of just in time delivery here. Gregory.
Yeah, just one thing to add here. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So also, it's important to realize that Jupyter isn't like a monolithic app that like we're adding to or that they need to take an upstream. So there's all sorts of plugins and extensions that we're writing that add things. So the amount of actual code and like, so we don't have to wait for Jupyter to take it or something like that, right? Like we get to use it whenever we want, and we can make extra extensions, and there's no real tying in other than just using the plugin architecture.
Gregory has been waiting very patiently, but I want to come back to this at the end. Gregory.
I don't see any obstacle to putting semaphore notifications into the portal. That seems to be quite straightforward. It's a React-based application. There's should be no trouble to integrate a component that displays these notifications.
I will say we're compulsive upstreamers in this team, and one of the things that has held us back a little bit is we got stuck on Jupyter Lab 2 a little bit too long because we had to, deal with other obligations of our construction timeline, which has meant that we have fallen a little behind, because now we even have trouble reporting bugs because everybody's like, "Are you running Jupyter Lab 3?" Quite understandably, to be clear, is like, run current and then we can help you. And so we've fallen a little behind there. We have actually upstreamed other kind of major components like changes to Cube Spawner and so on. But we are a little behind, which is why we want to get back on the Jupyter Lab current train, so we can actually start working within the plugin architecture and so on. What else do we have?
Douglas has a hand.
Yes. Hello. Yes. Yeah. The portal's really. I like to echo what others have said, that the portal's really, the portal and the everything is very, very. The RSP just very, very nice.
Thank you.
But the question I have is right now I'm about to. I've been working on some test code for the VNV route for basically sanity checking the tap server, and I was just kind of wondering what are the rough limits, because some of these queries are pretty large. I've been doing some already, but I'm not sure what are effective or effective limits or be nice to others limits that I should be thinking about when I run these queries on the data cloud.
That is a great question. There are many answers to this question. Thank you for asking it. I'm going to let Gregory go first because he was very fast with his hand.
So, I mean, there are of course limits, and you're seeing a system that hasn't been fully scaled out to the scope that we expect for the production system with data releases, and it's still, I would say, few million row queries, if they're not too wide, are perfectly doable in the system through the tap service. And I think up to about 1 million rows works very nicely. Again, if it's not too wide, if you're not querying for 300 or 700 columns in the portal in its current state. The one place where there are some non-obvious issues is that in some cases, particularly if you do what I would call kind of post-processing in your ADQL in a tap query, if like an order by, for instance, where there are intermediate results within our database, within the QServe database, that can be much larger than you think, and that is sometimes a limiting factor. So there are There are some quite naive queries that one would think would be easy, which turn out to be challenging. And this is something that we might have to do a slightly better job of articulating to users in the future of like where those limits are. But I think, you know, roughly speaking, if you're doing a spatial selection and you come up with 1 million rows, that should be fine in all parts of the science platform at this point.
So Igor is online. That would be great if he's actually able to participate and not driving
Yeah.
something. Igor, if you can unmute. Okay, great. So Igor is a member of the QServe group, which is our high performance database that the RSP uses to service your queries. Igor, the concern that a user has that, you know, can I do something that is too much? Can I break the system? I'm going to be a bad person if I make a too large query. Would you like to reassure the users and tell us what controls there are on the QServe side that protect the system from a naive query?
Yeah. So we certainly have certain limitations on that side, and in particular for two types of queries. The queries like, let's say, the naive query which Gregory has mentioned is like, say, select star from whatever, a table and leave it unconstrained or with some peak limit. We used to have some problems with this type of query because as it turns out, this is the first query which our users, they tend to try as they approach the top service and QServe in general. And so we used to have problems, but not anymore. The current version of QServe and the top should be able to deal with like really large constraint here, like a limit. So if you say limit like whatever 100K rows, and then it should work, right? But my suggestion would be actually to start with some small number and to see kind of, if you are really curious, like exploring the content of a catalog, then you start with some small number and then it will make you all your way up. And so in general, QServe has a built-in limitation for the amount of data which is like for the result sets. It's presently at the level of 1 gigabyte, right? In some occasions, this limitation could be hit earlier due to some internal constraint of the QServe architecture. But in theory, like if you kind of know how wide is your table and how many rows you want, like for this type of queries, like unconstrained, then it should work. The constraint query, when you have some or when you do the order by, especially order by or group by, this is like quite a challenging case, right? It's really, it depends like on the amount of the intermediate data which like has to be harvested from QServe, like data nodes before like doing the final aggregation stage. I mean, like it's hard. There is no like a specific formula which I could tell you on where the limitation is you have to like experiment with this right now. But I must assure you that the team is working hard actually to make QServe like better with each release, right? So just I mean, like it means like if you try something now, like and see some problem, like the problem might disappear like in a few weeks from now, like. But then also actually getting a feedback from users like you and others, it's really important for the team, since it helps us to see where are the actual limitations. We do a lot of testing internally, but like users is actually the last frontier of our testing. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you very much, Igor. I'm going to say, you know, Igor is like, he solves 3 problems before breakfast that would make me cry for a week. So he is doing terrific work there with QServe, and we really appreciate it. Okay, let me, I had a chance to look a little bit at the Slack, so let me get to a couple of questions. Very interesting. Okay, so let me, whoever said that they're happy that Ruben is going down the VO route, boy, we are so happy too. So let me talk a little bit about the kind of user specific environment questions. And a couple of those are, you know, maybe Will also want to chime in. So let me go back to the missing feature slide. So there have been questions on chat about essentially what about people who want to use their own code, and actually these questions have been phrased in two different ways, but I think are underneath the same question, which is I want to run my own stuff, can I download the data, and I want to run my own stuff, can I install it in the Science, but can I use it from the Science platform, right? So these are both aspects of the same question, which is, you know, we have provided a software environment and of course the LSSC science pipelines. What if people have their own code and they want to use it? So there are a number of answers to that question. So one of the answers that was given, I think, by Gregory, is that we make the standard VO protocols available, so you can actually hit the API from your local machine and, you know, get your data and then play with it with your heart's content. This is absolutely true, and in fact, it's perfectly reasonable. We don't try to stop you from having the data. The bulk download is not kind of the project has basically two senses of getting data, one getting data through the API and one for a data center to data center bulk download. Gregory can correct me, but kind of user bulk download is kind of not really defined, which means that access to the API services will be rate limited. So this is great if you have a small data set, but you know you can't load the entire cataloging QServe all billion rows by doing successive tab queries. That will probably get you cut off. I know Gregory wants to answer that point. Let me just quickly work down my stack and then I'll get back to this. We do absolutely encourage people to install software in their container in the notebook environment. You're free to do so. In fact, we have had many fights with many security departments in our infrastructures to allow you to do so. We do monitor what people are installing, and if there is something that is super popular, like everybody wants to install, I don't know, TensorFlow or something, we will add it, because we add on top of the our own packages, we also add commonly used packages that most people want to install anyway. So we will add them as we understand what they are. There is a user batch capability that is not currently fleshed out that would allow you to actually do parallelized batch computing with your own software, but that is very much kind of in preparation. And the third thing I will say, then this is just a philosophical comment, the science platform is not a lock-in, right? We don't try and make you stay in the science platform. The motivation behind the science platform was the recognition that, you know, these data volumes are very hard for individual users to deal with, and you know, partly to just facilitate the science, and partly to allow underserved populations who don't have access to a giant university cluster for compute and so on. We have created this model where people can come and use our services, our compute, our resources, our data stores in order to help them speed up their scientific discovery. But it is absolutely not an attempt to force you to kind of use our own products. Gregory.
So what I wanted to add on this topic is, because there was an allusion to bulk download, there's another method of data access that we're planning to provide that's, again, not exposed yet in DP 0.1, which is accessing the catalog data in the form of parquet files. So this is something that we're still in the process of kind of sorting out the architecture by which we're going to do this. I'm working with IBOA to figure out how to describe collections of catalogs as parquet files in a metadata service that will make them easy to query. But the intent is that we will make the at least the object catalog available as a set of spatially sharded parquet files, and that those will be usable both within the computing resources of the science platform itself, so that if you want to do parallel analysis in the user batch facility, for instance, that Frasi mentioned, or in future parallel computation environment that's a little bit more integrated with the Jupyter Lab environment, that they'll be used there, and they'll also be available for external access. As Frasi said, one place we are still trying to sort out exactly what to do is in the area of people who want to download the entire data set to a remote site. That's something that we're largely looking on as a data center to data center relationship, rather than something that we can just open up to absolutely everybody. But we're also very mindful of what happened with Gaia, where that was that was an extremely popular mode of use of the Gaia data. We are aware of this and thinking about how to extrapolate from that to what we do in the data release era. I think I don't want to say more about that because it's still under discussion.
So Mario is expressing a lot of enthusiasm for bulk user data download. I totally get it. I just want to say that, the issue of bulk data download is essentially a data facility responsibility, because of course it consumes directly their resources as opposed to kind of my resources. It is something that we're discussing. Like I said, it wasn't originally kind of planned. We see persistent requests for it, and we are considering how to enable it. I will also say that the data facility model is kind of still evolving. We went from NCSA to Slack. That transition is currently happening. We have our Google data facility. Operations is looking at a number of scenarios, including a hybrid in-house cloud-based hybrid model. And actually, depending on the kind of how this thing settled down, user bulk download may be kind of easier or harder. So we are keeping an eye on that. Adam.
Right. So I'm answering Brent's question more generally.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. Adam Bolton has his hand up. Sorry, other Adam.
Overloading Adam. Yes, I had a question about this this slide right here, the features yet to come. How finely scheduled are these or prioritized over the remaining years of construction?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and one that I at least should be able to answer. So there is right now, here's what has happened. We spent a lot of time prioritizing essentially the robustness and deployment aspects of the science platform. And the reason for that is because we are supporting now the telescope and commissioning, which is it was not an originally intended use of the science platform. Like if you had told me 5 years ago that the science platform was running inside the dome, I'd be laughing. We are essentially prioritizing robustness right now because it costs you night time when you go down, and Oxtel is using this for Oxtel runs at night. I am very, very sad to say that the feature I've been trying to get now for 3 years, which is the shared file space between a user's own laptop and the science platform, still have not been able to get to it. But to me, that's a very high priority because it really vastly increases the quality of the user experience for the notebook service. I am desperately trying to carve out time for that in the schedule. This addresses the kind of very common kind of user experience, which is I want to use my own editor. I want to just save my file and have it appear and be accessible, or my library have it accessible from my notebook. And we actually have a notional architecture for this. We just have not been able to bump it up. The other kind of stuff that has to happen sooner rather than later is to make progress on the VO image services, which right now are essentially very close to non-existent. And that is actually now our highest development priority for new features because for a number of reasons. Number one, by the time we get to DP1, we will, seriously, there'll be high demand for the image services as soon as there's LSSD data. It is actually a requirement for DP 0.2 as well, but the DP1 usage is basically an extremely compelling deadline. And so that is the kind of top priority. There are some things, like I'm going to say VO space and so on, and also user kind of self-created group management that are further down the list, purely because we don't anticipate real need for them until DR1. So if we're gonna, if something happens and, God forbid, we're out of time or we're delayed or the priorities change, there is a little bit more time, not in the programmatic schedule, but in the real kind of telescope schedule for those features. We are very much monitoring what people are asking. So if we see something that is causing a lot of kind of user confusion or unhappiness, we do actually bump it up the priority list. I'm not sure that actually, did you actually care about a specific thing you wanted to know, or yes, a general question?
Some things more than others, but yeah, it was mostly a general question. Just to ask about one more, the batch processing capabilities.
Sure. Right. So here is the situation with user batch. The original requirements that were drawn in this area basically envisage that we have a batch data production system, which is actually what does the data release processing, and we would commit to giving computational resources, ring fencing some computational resources on that batch system for the users to do ad hoc computing with it. So that, as envisaged, is essentially a requirement on the batch system, which is actually a deliverable of the data facility team and the middleware team. So to some extent, there is, if you go read the requirements legalistically, there is no science platform requirement towards the batch computing, except to allow interface to the batch computing service. Now, because time passes and we can see what the users are doing, we have identified 2 other layers of batch computing that we would like to service, or parallelized computing, high throughput computing that we would like to actually service, which are not in the requirements, but we would like to do them for the users because they're clearly extremely useful. So one of them is Dask. I know a couple of you folks have already, the new users have already asked about Dask. We actually do have a Dask service in kind of internal testing usage, but it's kind of not ready for prime time yet. We're still discussing some issues of how to support it. But Dask allows you very Pythonic, very transparent notebook level access to essentially high throughput computation. And it's something that people are increasingly familiar with. So I personally have committed to providing a Dask service, even though it's not in the requirements. There's a third layer, which we also have been discussing for a while, but is lower priority purely because, again, it's not a requirement for delivery of the project, which is essentially notebook level batch. Mario will remember this from quite a long time ago when we were talking about the weaponized notebook scenario. This is the idea that you play with your notebook until you're happy, and then you say, great, now take my notebook and run it over this huge collection of data. The kind of advantage there is that it gives the user a way of essentially parallelizing without doing something different for what they've been iterating already in their notebook. And so that is, completely kind of a brand new aspiration, but I do actually want to get to it somewhere in my timeline. It may have to be in the kind of post upstart pre-DR1 kind of window, but we can see that it would be extremely popular with the users. Adam Thornton.
Hi, so I'm going to attempt to address much of the thread about installing our own software, including Brent stuff and the Conda stuff. So previous to Rubin Env being Conda packaged.
Adam, you have to start off by explaining what Rubin Env is.
Okay.
Sorry.
Rubin Env is the Conda environment that contains the pipeline stack. I'm sure there is a more nuanced and correct answer to that, but I think for my purposes, that'll do. We do have all the usual virtual env stuff. We've got raw virtual in. We've got virtual in for Apper, which is what I like to use. We have PyEnv, I think, but all of that's not exactly deprecated. But since the stack itself is all conda-ified, you should probably be using conda. Now, this is kind of gross because you do have to clone the Ruben env environment. And when you do, because the root file system is not writable by you by design, it ends up cloning it into your home dir, which burns a lot of home dir space and also is pretty slow. However, once you've done that, then you can install whatever you like in that environment. However, you will have to install a kernel pointing to it with Jupyter install or ipykernel install. It's on the Googles. And then you will have to restart your container to pick up that new kernel as a possibility. This is all kind of gross, and I'm working on trying to figure out a simplified workflow and then document it, but I don't have much yet. The short answer is, for doing your own environment management with Conda, clone it, it'll end up in your home dir, and it works okay from there. I have, in fact, Brant, installed TensorFlow in my own kernel, and nothing breaks. I mean, I don't really know how to use it, but it does seem to appear and be importable. So it's possible. It is not yet easy or pleasant, and that's on my roadmap to at least make it a little easier. But the other thing is that it is quite possible, especially if you are pioneering stuff and you get something that you think would be useful for other people, but you've installed it yourself, and then at some point we decide, yeah, you're right, and it goes into the stack. It is very possible that you will end up with conflicting versions of stuff that make your containers not start, and that is exactly why we have given you the clear.local option on the spawner form. I should rephrase that. It does not entirely clear it. It simply moves it aside, so you can always go back in and fish out things you have installed from there. But that is typically a very good thing to try if you have installed software and then you find yourself unable to spawn a container the next time you try. And I think that was all I had to say there.
Very good. And Brand, I totally agree that we are underdocumented in this area, both on how to do it and on how to get yourself out of trouble when you do it. I have to say, I just want to recognize the Herculean efforts of the community engagement team, because, you know, being able to provide sufficient documentation for a public release this early of the platform was really a ton of work. But it does, you know, there are still things that we know we should try and find the time to explain that we haven't.
Can we talk about, there's a big thread going on in Slack about GPU availability.
Yeah, I was just seeing that. So here is again the kind of truthful and realistic, but also aspirational response. So there is a requirement to provide access to exotic architectures such as GPUs for the Science platform or through the Science platform, and we are not currently, this moment, intending to do so. It does not mean that such a service could not be added in the future. And as Knut pointed out, there is potential access to GPU resources outside the Science platform through the IDEC program. And in fact, it's one of the things that the IDEC program can bring to the table that we don't currently plan to make available. So that's the answer to that. I mean, I depending on how the kind of data facility architecture settles down, there are definitely situations that would make this a lot easier to provide. For example, if we're in a cloud-based infrastructure and we have the money for it, we can utilize any commodity GPU services that are available to us. It's just low on the priority list right now because we just have so many more important missing features. I note Michael's enthusiasm for the shared file system pipe dream. I am just going to resign in protest to myself if I don't get this delivered before the start of operations. It's something. It's actually right now the thing I would like to be working on more than anything else. But unfortunately, like, there's requirements. So boo. I also want to say something kind of that may be obvious to some folks, but not others. The science platform team is essentially rolling on to operations. In fact, it's potentially augmented in operations. And so while, programmatically, if this was a review, we were so used to talking to review panels. And if this was a talk to a review panel, we're so used to giving here are the requirements, and here's how far we're down the requirements list, and here's the milestones, and here how much down we're milestone list, and this giant kind of cliff date of the end of construction and how we're going to meet it. In practice, culturally and technically and socially, this is a platform that we intend to support and evolve until the lights go out. It is a very user-facing, user demands are evolving, the technology beneath us is changing so that we can actually do more with less. And while we are being, correctly defensive, I think, in terms of what you can have now, what you can have, for the remaining of construction, what you can have in the early operations, where there's a lot of pressure on the teams, for V&V and commissioning and early users and the first production of DR1. We are not going to call a halt to this and say, okay, we're done now. Thank you. We'll go work on something else. I mean, this is a kind of banner product for Rubin. We really stand behind it. We are delighted to see other data centers have success with adopting at least the general infrastructure of it. And we're going to keep at it. So the timer's not going to run out on features that you might actually want. It's just a question of when they can rise to the top of the pile. All right. We are starting to run down the clock. Do we have anything, Christine, that we haven't gotten to? All right. Oh, there's something on the Zoom, which I haven't even looked. Did we? Oh, yes. Pip install. Yes, we need to document user packages. That is definitely true. Any last questions or comments? All right, I just want to say, especially to the new users that came in recently through CET and through data preview and so on, we have had some absolutely excellent users. People have been fantastic about engaging discussion with us and filing issues and giving us a bit of a break when things don't quite work right, and we're trying to figure out how to operate a service on the scale. The eventual scale of the service is 8,000 to 10,000 users. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes to make the system scalable and performant. And we definitely appreciate your patience while we get all these things right. And if there's nobody else in,
So there was one more question from
Michael Colombo. That's usually Simon's job. Michael is offering me $1 million. Well,
I wish $1 million was as much as it sounded like.
$1 million.
Right. So let me very very quickly just cover a few things. So technically, there is a process by which if something would be like super useful, but is not actually planned, the process for actually contributing to this is through in-kind contributions. So there's been a lot of really good kind of proposals that come in that are above my pay grade to assess in most cases, but there are lots of other technical groups who essentially are offering technical support in various forms. One of those forms is directed effort, which means to just make their engineers available to some extent. In other terms, it's the software or services, and of course, there's in-kind contributions on the science side, of which I know nothing about. But if a private, if somebody had $1 million in the bank that I couldn't spend internally, or it was not covered by the income contributions, wow, what can I say?
If you can't think of it, I can.
I can too. I'm just wondering whether if I name some things, then I'm gonna leave somebody out who thinks they should be on the list,
no,
and then they would be sad.
The concern. I mean,
so I'm having.
While you're thinking about that, Frosty, we should clarify in-kind contributions are from international donors or international partners who want access to the data.
Yeah.
I think what Michael is saying is a donation, which typically went through the corporation. And the project is not a 401c. We can't take donations. They have to go through something like the corporation for that to happen. Although you could, of course, if we said, oh, develop X that Frosty wants, and you went off and developed it and handed it over to us, that would be a different thing. So just to be clear, that I don't think we should put this against in-kind contributions. That's a different kettle. Okay. And a different bucket of effort.
Okay, I assume it was a thought experiment, a donation. As to
that's how I took it as well.
It's a great one. It's like, I think Michael's asking, what's our priority besides getting operational? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's aspirational, but it's not entirely hypothetical, right? I mean, the corporation just arranged for $22 million.
Yep.
Private money to support various efforts. And when you go and talk to a foundation or private donor, they want to hear about something that they could point to that is the thing they enabled. And sadly, not even making everything well documented will be, appealing enough.
So I'm going to
be interesting to have that.
Yeah, I'm going to give you two different answers to this. I actually think that the offering parallelized computing at the notebook level, I think, is a great problem that would actually be totally applicable to non-astronomical use cases. It's a kind of problem I could actually absolutely solve. We have had many whiteboard discussions in the team on how to do it, but it's just so hard to prioritize compared to everything else. So if the donor wanted something to their name, that is what I would pull out of the list, exactly for the reasons that Michael says. It's very standalone, it's very generic, and there's a lot of thirst for it. I will say, if I had $1 million to donate myself, and therefore I did not need the ego stroke of having it go to a specific thing with my name on it, what I would do is I would actually offer bounties in some cases to upstream providers to add features that we would like. We upstream a lot, but there are many situations where we're like, oh, if only this package did X, it would save us so much work, or things would be so much simpler, or whatever. So if it was my own money and I could spend it however I wanted without any real world restrictions, I would actually try to essentially buy development in some of our upstream open source dependencies, because that again, it gives to everybody, because the things that we want, they're not weird. We do stress systems way beyond where they were intended to in some cases, but we have an emerging use case. I feel that this, the kind of science, the kind of hosted analysis platform is the use case going forward in a lot of domains, and we just haven't caught up with it yet. So that's what I would do. I would just, shore up the kind of open source ecosystem that surrounds us and that we depend on, and encourage them to work on some of these issues. I think
I really
Gregory
like your point
also.
of a thing that help,
sorry.
I really like the point of a thing that would specifically help Ruben and also had broader impact. That sounds like the perfect kind of thing.
Right.
I'll be in touch.
All right, thank you. I will. I'll send you I'll wire you my bank account details. Gregory, did you have something you wanted on this list? I did see your face light up.
Well, I mean, I think after what you just said, maybe I'll hold my peace. But I mean, there are definitely areas where I think our requirements are not, are not sufficient to justify construction effort. But where I believe, especially just after kind of seeing how people are using the system and how other people's science platforms work, that there would be points of leverage. And I would, if a donor wanted something visible for their work, that's a slightly different question than where would we most like the work to go, right? Because if a donor would be best served by having a more generically usable thing come out of it, rather than something that's only relevant within the context of our system. And there are some things that are specific to our system that we could do to make it better. There are other things where we could just develop generic open source software that everyone in the community would benefit from. And I think a donor would probably be more interested in the latter in the long run. It's hard to know. It depends on the donor.
Yeah. I will say that
if you're serious, I would be very interested in engaging in a conversation about where I think the points of leverage are.
This is how to get attention.
Just to,
yes. Yeah, this is the how to get attention. It's $1 million on the table. Let me just say one thing in the Slack, just to correct. So Perry said the in-kind contributions are targeted to science collaborations. This is actually not true. Their in-kind contributions are targeted in a vast variety of programs, including generic contributions to the science platform team, to the operations, to the pipelines, and so on. There are in-kind contributions targeted to specific science collaborations, but that is definitely absolutely not all of them, and I'm not even sure they're in the majority. And finally, I will just answer yet again out of the box the question that Michael just said, which is, if it was my $1 billion, I would buy Chuck an extra 2 days of commissioning time, which is probably all they would buy. But I'm gonna say that we need commissioning time more than we need anything else at this point. Okay, Will points out that we've run out of time. This has been super interesting, and thank you. It was a great discussion. Very good to us to see real people using our stuff. This was pitched as you guys should meet us, but really we wanted to meet you and remind ourselves that there is a point to all this. And thank you for the nice comments up front. And I will upload the slides and create a summary slide for the breakout summary session. And we will go back. I will go back and reread all the Slack and pitch into any questions that still need some commenting. Are we good? All right.
Thanks everyone.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. And so we're gonna do this regularly in future PCWs. So we'll see you next year, hopefully with actual coffee.
Thank you.
Right.
It's wonderful to have users on our system, and we just appreciate all the feedback that we get from you. It's going to help us make a much better system.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks a lot.